Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to our webinar today. Hello, my name is Paul Branch. I'm the Chief Networking Officer here at World Commerce and Contracting, and it's my absolute delight to be your host for this webinar today. So, collaborative intelligence, how contracting teams can combine the strengths of humans and artificial intelligence technologies to improve performance. If that's what you've come to listen to, then you're in the right spot. We've got a great webinar for you today. I'm rejoined, in fact, by my colleagues Jerry and Lauren. Welcome to the call, guys.
Thank you.
So Jerry is from ContractPodAi, our partner for the session today. He's Chief Evangelist and GC at ContractPodAi. And Lauren, welcome. Lauren is, if you take a look onto the next slide, then Lauren is Qualitas Consulting Group President. So great to be working with you guys again. This is going to be so much fun. So just a few housekeeping thoughts before we start. You've joined our call today with your line muted. Not because we don't want to hear from you, we most definitely do. So use that Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. Ask us questions as we go, and I'll pose them to our panel, and we'll get you answers as we walk through. There's also a Q&A slot at the end, so if there's meaty questions, we'll save those up to the end and we'll address them before we finish. So you'll get a copy of the slides that we're going to share. There's some really good information in these slides today, so please take advantage of that. And you'll also get a link to the recording. So if we're going to move quite fast because we've got a lot of content to cover. So if you've missed something or weren't quite sure, then please go back and listen to the recording. And indeed, welcome to those folks who are listening to this recording for the first time on replay. So, okay, so then before we get into the detail, we have a poll for you. So we're going to talk a little bit about this afterwards, but we'd really like to hear your thoughts. What do you think is the biggest myth regarding AI technology? Is it that AI will replace human jobs? Is it that AI will solve all of your problems? Is it that AI and machine language are the same thing and interchangeable? Or is it that AI is only for large business? So please select the one, the biggest myth that you've heard for artificial intelligence. And if your favorite myth isn't there, stick it in the chat. Let us hear your view. That's if we haven't captured something that's burning for you. Okay, Jen, let's close the poll and let's see where we are. So 43% folks say that the biggest myth is that AI solves all your problems. In my experience, it can actually create a few, but we'll get to that. Second, AI will replace all human jobs. I've actually heard that delivered in the context of contract management too. Clearly, there remains a lot of hype out there about the capabilities and what artificial intelligence is going to bring to the contracting table. We're going to explore some of that today. And Lauren, in just a sec, is going to share some of the learning from her experiences of successful deployment of AI technology. Interesting, AI is only for large business. That's also false. 10 years ago, perhaps, when the cost of entry to deploy an AI solution was so high, it was the bastion of large enterprise. Now there are some really good, cost-effective artificial intelligence capabilities that are built into low-cost CLM platforms that really do change the dial. We'll be looking at some of that. And clearly, ML and AI, branches of the same science for sure, but as we're going to see, are quite different. So guys, anything in the poll that strikes you as being weird, bizarre, inconsistent with what we thought?
I'm a little disappointed we took out the question that the biggest myth was AI will replace Paul Branch. And And unfortunately, that came out. But no, these are really things, Paul, we hear all the time. You know, whenever I speak, whenever I talk, even Lauryn and I have had this discussion, people think AI is either a panacea for all their problems or it's going to replace their jobs. And it's scary because of that. I've worked in this industry now for a long time. Thank you, Rod. Paul is irreplaceable.
Rod, you're my hero.
we will download. What we'll do is we will talk about downloading his consciousness into the global network, and he will live on forever. But I think these are what we hear all the time, and it's just something that is going to stay, because we science fiction and science fact are often intertwined, and a lot of the time we talk about this robot, this computer is going to take us over. This is what's going to happen, and it's not true. We're going to be and we'll talk about this a little later, I think, too. But there is a harmonious, a virtuous way for us to work together. It does not need to be a job replacement, but it's all about something we'll mention a little bit later called augmented intelligence, and how that really helps us build this out.
Totally. Okay, so let's get into the meat then, Jerry, and take us through some of the basics. When we talk about AI, what do we actually mean in this contract framework?
Sure. So look, anybody who's on the call right now or that's listening can read the what's up there. But really, this is artificial intelligence at its core is what we're using to enable computers to make decisions, do automated predictive tasks, and to mimic human intelligence. On the next slide, actually, is a little more detail about this. And there's three levels of AI that we really talk about today. Sorry, I just saw the chat pop up, and I'm laughing at I'm looking at Raj's comment, and that's another thing we've heard. AI is going to make it so everything's here instantaneously, and it isn't. And I'm sure some of you have seen the video that came out yesterday or the day before about an autonomous vehicle deciding that after it got pulled over for not having a driver, it decided to speed away from the police officer that pulled it over. So if you haven't seen that, just look for AI car speeds away from traffic stop. Search Google or Bing or your preferred search engine. Sorry. So there's really, what we look at is there's three levels of AI. AI is really your general term for the entire area. We then get to machine learning, which has a level of learning capability to train itself. You feed data into an algorithm, you use that data to train the model, you test and deploy the model, and then you use that model to do a prepared task, to do a predictive task. Deep learning is the next level of machine learning. And sometimes you'll hear someone talk about deep neural networks or training a machine to mimic a human brain. When we talk about deep learning, we're talking about almost multiple levels of AI and machine learning in that function. So if you want to think about it in the sense of a contract, let's kind of build that out a little, if it's okay with you, Paul.
Sure.
Machine learning may tell you that, hey, this document looks like a contract, but that doesn't really help you unless you're just trying to sort through 10,000, 100,000 documents in a file system, and you want to say which ones look like contracts, which ones don't. Once we get into deep learning, we begin building further down and taking it from, okay, this looks like a contract, to this has these specific ideas that you only find or that are typically found in contracts, to here we're going to dig down into the clauses and understand what's going on. We call these in the field, they're usually called layers. And you go through different layers of artificial intelligence to figure out what's going on there. So if you want to use machine learning, great, you can get some idea of what's in that document, what's in a system. But deep learning is really the next stage. You're taking that information, you're taking it, going through it. You do need a lot of information initially, which is something that a CLM vendor and the deep learning providers out there in the contract management space are doing, to make predictions, to take that in, and you keep building layer upon layer upon layer. If you want to think of it more like a human thing, day one of school, you didn't learn calculus. You started with basic mathematics. You started learning how to add. Once you knew how to add, you can learn how to subtract, multiply, divide. Once you got through mathematics, arithmetic, you got into geometry. Once you got out of geometry, you went into algebra. Then you got into calculus. Now, most of us don't go on, most of us don't go on to deal with theoretical physics or Calc 7. I'm not sure how far Calc goes on in college. I stopped at Calc 2. But it's that sort of process that you continue to build layer after layer after layer. And there is quite a bit out there on this, much more than we can cover in one call. But basically, if you want to think about it, artificial intelligence is your big circle. It enables the computer to mimic human intelligence. Machine learning allows you to teach a machine to be better at tasks through algorithmic learning. And deep learning is artificial neural networks, taking multiple layers of machine learning to transform and teach it on the next level of tasks. With contracts, that means extracting information, giving you actionable insights, being able to pull data from one side and compare it to another to tell you when something doesn't match. And it's going to be my pleasure in a little bit to go through that very quickly. And Paul has seen this now twice, and hopefully you will find it as amusing as Paul does once I dig deep into this. So I know that was a lot of information all at once. Paul, Lauren?
Just an observation, I guess a question from me really. I get the machine learning. I've deployed and used tools that have that technology. And I see that as sort of really, really, really smart pattern matching. Deep learning, though, to me is understanding the semantics of language, to understand and to interpret. Do you believe that technology, I see 2010 here, do you really believe that technology is at that state now where it can at least start to do that? Or are we still on that journey?
We are seeing it. And, it really depends on what your need is. There was a lot of talk last year about something called GPT-3 and these transformation layers that can write articles that look like human writing without any human intervention. And now there's actually a whole market of AI-generated, deep learning model-generated drafting tools that will help you prepare an article or a story or even a webinar by basically you tell it the general idea of what you want to write about, and it will give you cues. It will give you an understanding. Where we're seeing this more in the contract space is really text analytics, as you noted. We're seeing named entity recognition. So one of the things that we're starting to do here at ContractPod is, who's named in the document. If it says it's between ContractPod and World CC, but then we call them provider and purchaser, can it understand that? And this is really a lot of semantic learning of understanding what is in a document and providing information back to the humans who need to read it so that they don't need to spend as much time on the little things like even just identifying the parties because they know it's already been done. And I think going back to that poll question we had a moment ago, it's the goal is not to replace a job. The goal is not to interfere with how humans work, but it's really to get deeper into the ideas and deeper understanding and make things go faster so we're not spending time on these tasks. Another area and something that's really cool is machine translation. And I know we're kind of well, actually, we see this a lot in contracts. We've got it built into our product. But the idea that we can now accurately and quickly translate a document that, we're actually comfortable showing to another person. In 2010, when Google Translate first came out, or Microsoft Bing Translator first came out, you would put a sentence in, Paul, that would say something like, "I once used the bathroom," and it would come out with something in another language that was like, "Bathrooms are really exciting, and I want to be able to use them." Now, yeah, it translated it, but not in a useful manner. With our translation tool and with some of the other tools out there, you actually get usable linguistically correct translation to the point where I've actually run things through and gotten questions like, "Oh, are you a native German speaker?" Because it's that impressive. Now, in the end, I still go to my translation company and say, just make sure this is correct. I don't want to find out that the machine made a mistake, but I can do 99% of the work now without needing to go to an outside translator. And I can go to the outside translator for the thing that I really need, which is certified translation, accurate, perfect document translation. And we're seeing that same thing with analytics. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if you asked a computer to do this, it would pull out entire pages and say that's what you looked for. Now, and we'll see this a little later, you can actually see you can actually get that information quickly and have it be bespoke, tailored to what you actually need, and not pulling out an entire page, but perhaps pulling out the one clause, the one line in a much larger paragraph that applies to this. And I apologize. I get very excited about this stuff, which is why I became chief evangelist here. But it's very cool to me also as a lawyer and contracting professional because it saves so much time. And Paul, for those of you who haven't spoken with me before or haven't heard this, I was a customer before I joined ContractPod. I'm not just your, "Oh, I joined this and here I'm talking about this." I actually joined it because I love the product. And, what is it? It's that thing. I'm not just a user. I'm not just a employee. I'm also a former customer. I'm an internal customer today.
That excitement, Jerry, is palpable. So that's really good. And we're going to hear the same from Lauren in just a hot sec. But let's focus now on the barriers. What are the challenges that we see when using this technology in contracts and in the legal space?
Well, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it says me, but I think it's Lauren who's going to talk about it.
Okay. So Lauren. I do think that if you recognize some of these barriers, they're very much attuned to those myths that we had at the beginning, where people have a certain amount of fear, certain amount of, am I going to know how to use this technology? Am I going to have enough time to use it? Look at the first three. They're all about feeling confident as a human with how you're supposed to use and interact with technology. So AI can be very mystifying to people because they don't feel like they can command a lot of knowledge about it because it's a fast-moving industry. They also feel like they're so busy, they don't have time to learn the technology. But I think those three on the left really speak to human behavior. The two on the right speak more to organizational behavior, which is, lack of well-defined strategy in place and information security concerns. I'll open it to Jerry to talk about the core of this barrier, but it's, are we going to trust something to have our most precious data? So if you notice the themes here, the barriers are all about comprehension, understanding, planning, and trust. Gentlemen, do you want to contribute?
No, I think that's pretty clear, Lauren. And I just put this in the chat as well, except I only sent it to myself, Lauren, and Paul. So the rest of you can't see it, but I'll paste it there. The tremendous barriers are really around fear of new things, but also timing. And I just put this in the chat, but whether it's more than 70% of people who responded to this poll reported that they received less than 3 hours of training in legal technology and contracting technology in the last 12 months. So, strategy is a big issue. If your company doesn't have a technology strategy that focuses on contract technology and legal technology, you have to be the one out there asking for it. It's not going to be something that they're going to come up by their own. Information security, that's big on everybody's mind. But those are organizational issues, as Lauren mentioned. The other side is human issues that we have to solve, human problems that have to be solved. And whether that's sorry, I'm looking at Raj's note and laughing a little, but yes, I too fear being that Jarvis will hack me from time to time. But the thing is, there's really a human issue here where either companies, people, or as a joint effort are not getting enough training, not doing enough thinking about this. And it's something that we really need to work on as professionals in driving this kind of understanding and knowledge, because one of the biggest impact that you can have with any sort of enterprise technology is training people to use it. Mm-hmm. Because once they're trained, they can actually use it. And speaking from experience and knowing this and having this been my big failure the first time I ever put in an enterprise legal and contract technology, without the training, people don't use it. They don't want to use it. They don't feel like that you care about them. So it's the number one thing I think in adoption is teaching people what they should use and encouraging them to use their technology.
Totally. So we've looked at the barriers, and we're going to come back to some of this because Lauren's got some really good tips to how to overcome some of these barriers. But let's jump to the benefits. What is in it for the folks deploying this technology?
So outside of the potential, assistance from future artificial intelligences like AI or data from Star Trek, at that point, yes, I think we will have a much more interesting life, and hopefully we'll be able to fly our own starships. But there's a lot of benefits that using AI with technology for contract, technology for legal, enterprise technology, is that you do get huge benefits that you can see. Looking at what's on your screen, there's speed benefits, there's value benefits, there's risk avoidance benefits. And ultimately, the drive for every company is profitability and revenue. We want to make money. So we want to see that. Now, I do know that, and I want to touch on this because Paul, and I'm going to get it before Paul gets it. We know that there's an up to 8% reduction, but the big thing is what we don't say here. 8% is an average. What we know is that companies and respondents to this World CC poll reported anywhere from 5% to 50% reduction in value erosion. And Paul, if I got that wrong, I'm sorry, but I know that's on the slides you sent me.
As a consequence of deploying automation of some description. Yep, totally. And a large chunk of that, Jerry, is down to the successful deployment of artificial intelligence, for sure. Lauren, what's your view on risk, for example? What can the technology do there?
Well, if you ask most legal departments, what they're doing is managing the contingent liabilities of the company or managing risk and helping their business constituents understand risk so well. And the benefits of AI are the ability to have quantifiable and qualifiable risk metrics. So every company has a risk profile or an appetite for how much risk they can accept or can accept. Some of that, the capability of AI is the ability to track how many times are you modifying a certain provision in the contract? How many times are you modifying a provision to such a degree that it creates a blip on your risk radar, so to speak? So I think the systems that utilize a risk appetite, like a definition of risk, a weight of the risk of a provision, and the ability to react to it in a workflow, that's really where the benefit comes in. And it's not just in identifying it, guys, it's also in acting upon it and making better decisions based upon what you've done in previous similar contracts.
I think that's the key, the ability to assimilate a lot of historical performance information that identified material risks and to use that then as a predictive indicator of what's going to happen with this new contract in the future. That's where technology can play a role. Do you see that as well?
I do. And I think that is one area where it even does better than a human, because our memories they're faulty at times. And we don't know how many times we've actually agreed to modify a certain provision, especially when you have a high volume of contracts coming across your desk. So knowing that you have technology that's guiding you and speed reading through all of your history is actually very much a helpful aid. It's all meant to aid and enable. It's not meant to replace.
Right. Cool.
And I would add, sorry, Lauren, if you're done. Are you done, Lauren?
Yeah.
Okay. I would add, because something you said just now really made me think of this thing that we see all the time in legal and contracting professionals, which is, I just saw this recently. What did I write? What did I do? How do we answer this question? One of the things we can do with AI, one of the things we can begin seeing is creation of our playbooks, creation of figuring out what works, what doesn't work. And really, we spend, look, I'm a lawyer. I have a whole Word file, and yes, it's a Word file, that I've maintained over my entire career, where I put, oh, I really like that clause, or, oh, hey, I've had to replace this clause a lot. Now we can begin having help in figuring out when that actually happens. It's not just, I think I use this a lot, but really it's become, hey, your default clause is always deleted. You've never actually got into a contract, no matter how much you hope and pray that the other side will miss it and give you full liability for everything everywhere. It's never worked. But now I can go back and say, hey, we've actually replaced this in 87% of contracts with this clause. Why don't we just make this our default? So you're avoiding risk, you're really speeding things up, because if you get that one thing that always causes a problem out of the way, you can begin speeding things up. You can begin delivering value. You're not avoiding a risk. You're avoiding a risk that you never even needed to worry about. And I guarantee you, your sales team will be happy because they're getting to their deal closure much faster.
Totally, which drives that 80% reduction in average cycle time. That's huge. Just think what that would do for cash flow. Excellent. Okay, so let's look at this. Let's look at this in stages then, Lauren. Take us through this roadmap of how we get to this collaborative intelligence.
Okay, so this is how you go from wherever you are to where you want to be. So the very first thing you want to do is ask yourselves, what are you up for? Are you ready for using AI, and in what capacity? And then a functional inventory of, okay, what tools are available to you? What tools are available that suit your needs? So what can you use that you already have versus what are you ready to change? So a good strategy always starts with an assessment. Then you want to go into market analysis and program planning. So market analysis is looking at what tools meet the gaps based on your inventory, right? So you inventoried, you found that you had a couple of things you were missing. So now you want to do a market analysis. And there's a further slide that talks about the checklist of things that you want to look for in an AI solution. And then program planning. So program planning is not computer programming, it's referring to program management, which is incorporating all of the different projects that you have going on in your environment into a cohesive program that's all oriented around the same kind of objective. Planning your program is setting up a charter. It's deciding what your steer co is going to be. It's deciding what your goals are, what your key performance indicators are going to be. And then you always want to do a pilot. Always start with a pilot because you learn so much through hands-on. Humans are just, we're experience creatures. We want to see what it's like to use something. And in AI, it's often a sample or a specific type of contract that you're going to use, or a specific portion of your playbook that you want to automate. And then an agile implementation. Agile is best, not just because machines learn in a compounding fashion, but also because humans learn what they want in a compounding fashion. So you always want to build on things. And let's keep in mind that your risk position changes, your business changes. And so you always want to be in this constant state of agility in how you're rolling things out. And then step 4 is continuous improvement. So after you've gone live with using your new tool set, you're never done. You always want to continuously recalibrate and enhance. Now, I want to be careful here and say this doesn't mean that you have to continue feeding and doing a big effort in how the machine is learning. You don't have to continually tune that, but you have to continually be in tune with what your business is doing. And you have to be looking at the data that you're receiving from the systems and be able to respond to that and make good decisions based upon what you're seeing. And you want to measure your key performance indicators. You want to measure that, saying, what is our cycle time? Has our risk position changed? Are we seeing that reduction in contract bloat or loss, excuse me? And then step 5 is have a pizza party. And so make sure that you are celebrating your successes, that you are communicating how great those KPIs are. Because when you celebrate, you're communicating and you're also dispelling any fears that people have had. So with communication comes comfort. And so just recognize that all of this is how that works together, whether what you're doing is a simple playbook automation, or if you're implementing the entirety of ContractPodAi and its complement of AI capabilities, or whether or not you're just doing something to review a few contracts from a legacy project. All of these apply regardless the scope that you have.
Really interesting, Lauryn. Question for you. Going back to what you said about the need to continuously oversee, not necessarily rework in material ways, but certainly oversee. Do you see that today as being human-led, machine-assisted, or machine-led and human-assisted?
It's human-led and machine-assisted, because when I talk about continuous improvement, I'm talking more about knowing what is changing in your business, watching the trends, using the insights from what patterns AI has identified to make better decisions in how you're running your business. So from a legal perspective, as an example, you may start where Jerry started with a big Word document that's 15 years old, and then you may transform that into a clause library and then the memory of the AI is telling you, hey, you really haven't used that clause that you think that is so hot there in a while. And, you know, that's not needing to be in your library anymore, but you might have identified that there's 10 other things that your library doesn't have, or you haven't figured out your process for what to do when there's an exception. And that process piece of it is very important to really be prepared, not only for setting up the technology for successful implementations, but setting yourselves up for how you're going to use it.
Very good. Okay, so great setup. Let's get in now into our best practices. Lauryn, share with us your 3 best practices to deploy and successfully manage artificial intelligence solutions.
So I know Jerry's going to help me with these 3 slides, but the number one thing you're going to do in that assessment, like that stop 1 of the journey, is you're going to identify your key pain points and a plan of attack. So you have to educate yourselves a little bit on what all is possible, but you want to look at things where there's a lot of stress in your organization, right? Or a lot of pain. So consultants talk about pain points a lot. That really means that it's coming up over and over. So you're looking for a frequency. You're looking for something that has a lot of complaints or a lot of bloat, or you know, you also might be looking at where you've got a lot of requests for change inside your company. Unmanageable workloads, those are really prevalent right now. So post-COVID, people are trying to figure out new ways of working with each other. Some people, you know, some companies have gone smaller. Looking at those workloads and trying to figure out the best way to make things more efficient is often a road that leads you to AI. And then really look hard at what should be automated and what should remain a human task. So humans don't go away with AI. Humans look better and smarter and faster with AI. So there's human tasks like judgment of when a potential customer is big enough that you're going to accept that risk versus when you're not. That's a good judgment call, because we all know that there are certain clients where you're like, okay, I'm not going to be in the pole position on this negotiation. The system's not necessarily going to know that, right? But should the creation of the playbook be something that can be automated based upon a volume of contracts you've had in the past? Yeah. But knowing which division in your company you're going to go launch next and how you're going to train them, that's going to be a human task. And then identify how automation will be implemented and supervised. So implement, just like our roadmap slide showed, you want to do this in a phased approach. You want to do a pilot, and then you want to build upon the successes, celebrate those successes, and then kind of continually improve. Jerry, what do you want to add to this here?
I mean, Lauryn, that was perfect. The only thing I think I can add there is that when you're talking with your implementation partner, when you're trying to pick out something, and Lauryn said this, so I'm really just repeating something she said. It's telling them where your pain points are is the number one thing that I think you should do when you're trying to figure out, because a good partner, the vendor, the consultant, is going to work with you to solve those issues. If you don't tell them where you're struggling, you're going to get something that may work. You're going to get something that will be functional, but it may not solve your need. And if you're looking to address a need, if you're looking to streamline unmanageable workflows, if you're looking to determine what needs to be done, that's when you can set it out, because it's a lot easier to do it. It's the best time to do it is before you start, and you can always add things in. But if you don't do it at the beginning, you're going to solve a problem, but it may not be the problem you really needed to solve. You're going to solve a pain point, but you may not hit the right one. So you want to shoot for the best case right out of the gate, rather than a general use case.
And the good consultants will help guide you too. So, you know, shameless plug here, but what we do is we help you figure out what you're ready for. We help you identify that, there's different solutions that are going to meet different needs, and we'll help you craft the best complement of technology, process, and how the people are going to use it. So don't think of this as onerous or overwhelming. It really isn't. There are people out there like us that can help you every step of the way.
So step one, identify your key pain points and a plan of attack. Got it. What's step two?
Choosing the right horse. So you do want to select the right technology for the job. It's got to have a balance of how the human's going to interact with it and good AI. I have seen some amazing capabilities with AI with the most god-awful interface. And so it's while it's great, yeah, you did this great thing, but I have to do somersaults in order to use it. Like, that's not the good combination, right? So you want that balance of how the human's going to react to what they see on the screen and what the technology is going to do under the hood. And then ensure that the assumptions built into the system align with your values. This is going back to risk. What are you up for? So if you have a really strong risk tolerance, then its assumptions on what it suggests are going to be different than if you have a very low risk tolerance due to the industry or whatever factors might be the case. So the systems that there's configuration that you do to make a system work according to your requirements. There's also system configuration that's based upon how that system works best out of the box. And then finally, there's occasionally some customizations that are done in order to really calibrate a system to the requirement that you have. But all of that's got to go to your values. And I know it may sound weird to talk about values right now, but it really is talking about your risk position, what you're ready for, how the technology is going to grow and expand as you use it.
Perfect. That first one, making sure the system balances human and AI technology, is obvious, I think, but it's really quite hard to do. Yeah. Any thoughts about how to do that? Just off the top of my head, making sure that the platform itself has an agile user interface, so that if it's not quite right, you can tweak it without having to spend a fortune or go back to the vendor.
So the number one requirement that we hear from as consultants is it should be user friendly.
Right.
The number one most undocumented definition is user friendly. So it means something different to different people. Right. Easy to use is where it's very clear the step I should take next and who has the ball. And I think that's the way you think about it. And that's, there's so much here, Paul. I don't know how to explain, but user-friendly is the number one thing that people are looking for. And that balance, just remember, guys, that an uncommunicated requirement is going to be an unmet one. So be really forthcoming about the things that you want. It's not going to hurt your strategic position in negotiating with vendors or consultants to do that. Tell them what you really need and help them guide you on how to best use those tools to your benefit.
Sure. Okay, so we've chosen the right smart tech for the job. What's your third best practice, Lauren?
Continuous improvement. So it's the Kaizen concept of pilot the new system and the new workflows, expand upon your workflows. What companies will often do is take something super easy and start there. And the reason for that is because it gives you a quick win, it gives you confidence, it gives you something that you can celebrate and have a pizza party about. And then it also gives you something that is foundational that can be built upon it. Because most organizations that have their own contract templates are going to have a certain way of contracting. So I had one client that called it the nifty 9. There were 9 provisions that were going to be in every contract. They might not all be in the same place, but chances are if you got a contract from this company, you would see that the contracts all kind of looked similar. And so when you start with one type of contract or one business unit or one team as your pilot, usually the next one, the lift to do the next one isn't so bad. And it just can expand upon those. What we're seeing a lot of times is that the clause library for a master service agreement and the clause library for a master purchasing agreement are going to have a whole ton of overlap. And so that's where you start to see that as an example. And then retest and make improvements to ensure everything is in place. It can't be understated that you're not done the day you go live with something new. You're never done until you're dead. You're always going to be continually improving things and looking at ways that you can reassess what you've done and how to learn more from it. Now, everybody, don't go run out and think that you have to have a team of 10 people to support the solution for the rest of the time you use the solution. That's not what I mean. It really just means that you're establishing an enhancement process. And you know that once a quarter or once every 6 months or once a year at least, you're looking at how your technology is working for you. You're looking at the data and the insights that you've received from it, and you're making good business decisions on how you're going to update and modify as you go forward.
Reinforces the point that Raj has made in chat, the fact that this is an iterative activity. You know, you're going through this process multiple times, every time moving the ball forwards in incremental steps in an agile way. Totally.
That's the best practice, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the way to do it. So Jerry, thoughts and observations on this one?
I think one of the areas that I take, and I think this slots very nicely into Lauryn's thought process, is part of this is also there's an internal leadership aspect that you have to think of. And I will talk about my mistake, which is the first time I ever implemented a CLM, which was 5-6 years ago. I made the mistake of being the dictatorial GC. I said, this is what we're going to do. You're going to use it, whether you like it or not. It didn't get much adoption. It was the sales team fought me. They didn't like this. The procurement team fought me. They didn't like that. And I learned very quickly from that. And the second time I did this, when I went through a big process of figuring this out, I invited those people to join me. So as part of your virtuous cycle, it also takes into account, getting the internal feedback, finding what's working, finding what doesn't work. Lauryn had mentioned user interface. There is a lot of variety out there, from fully customizable systems to systems that are where they tell you, we're not making any changes. You use this, whether you like it or not. And I think as you work through this, as you're selecting something, and of course, I think ContractPodAi is great.
Of course.
But the goal is really to pick something that will work for you, that will work for the people who need to use it, and that you can continuously test, learn, and improve. Always be making those improvements, rather than always be closing, always be improving.
So let's move on to the value. How do you measure, how do you determine that value of this human and machine collaboration, Jerry? What's your thoughts?
So earlier, Paul, I had spoken a little bit about the collaborative nature of AI, human beings and machines. Mm-hmm. I actually call it intelligence augmentation, or augmented intelligence. And really, the goal you want to do this is you want the value to show in improved turnaround times, in completion speed, in how fast you're getting things done, but also, are you hitting the targets, the risk targets you have? the delivery targets you have. We're looking at this really not just from the aspect of is it giving you some result, but that a measurable result that you can bring back and be positive about. I like to say in this process, part of our job here at ContractPod, and I guess yours at World VC and Lauryn's at Qualitas, is we want to make you as the customer, as the purchaser, we want you to look good. We want you to achieve what your goals are. We want you to do that, to make that happen. And so we want you to find that spot, that sweet spot, where you're achieving more in less time and you're getting the results that you're looking for. And I think that value will be different depending on what your organizational goals are. But in general, if you're improving your completion speed, if you're achieving your ROI or doubling or tripling it, which is something we see consistently with this sort of technology, then you've got a real collaborative value that you can begin expanding from your position to other areas of the business.
Cool. Okay, I think before we look at an example of an AI tool in real life, Jerry, let's just do a quick poll of our audience to see where we are. So over the next 12 months, guys, question for you. By how much do you plan to increase your AI technology investment? So 12 months period, AI technology specifically. Answer one, you've got no investment today or in the future, nothing planned. And then the quartiles up to 25 to 50 to 75 and 100. And then you're actually planning to decrease the investment that you're making in artificial intelligence. So share your results, share your views where you are. And just a couple more seconds, Jen. Let's close the poll now. Let's see where we are. Nearly half, 43% have no investment plans for the investment in AI technology. 25% and 50% increases are the next. Nobody's planning to decrease investment. Interesting. Guys, what's your view on the poll?
I think this is fascinating. If anybody feels brave enough to chat, for those that don't have an investment planned, is this because there's still proof that your organization requires, or is it just too new to be a budgetary item for you yet?
Or the other end of the spectrum, you've implemented and there's not a need to continue going to the world, but you've got enough right now. Some of the organizations I'm working with, they have enough AI deployed technology. They're not using all of the capabilities in metadata extraction or some of the deep learning deployments that are out there. So they're taking a pause, consuming what they have before they move on to the next one. So good question. Let's put that into the chat. If you
and thank you, Jean, for your courage in sharing. So the value proposition is something that's real, is trying to justify this. Just to give you some insights, one of the ways that people justify expenditure is in that cycle time reduction. So you try to figure out, all things being equal, what's the value of an hour of an employee? And if we know that historically you can reduce things by 70%, what does that turn out to be? And suddenly those numbers start to look really interesting to people who care about budgets. So that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is your risk position. So if you know that you're having a common issue where you're not getting to renewals when you want to, or you're not getting a particular discount attainment or something, the ability to quantify the loss versus how AI could help you is also a way to justify this and explain that value to people. And then the third thing is usually just the user interface and the capabilities of enhancing the tools that you have and really working with a company that's got a good product roadmap so that you not only have benefit today, but KPIs in the future.
we're going to come to the demo in just a hot sec. But just to augment that, Lauren, one of the things that we've seen from our research is that many of the folks investing in AI today are doing it to see benefits in terms of efficiency, cost reduction, doing things faster and smarter. AI has a great role to play in that, undoubtedly. But I think we're missing out on the piece of the application of artificial intelligence to do things that we can't simply do today. Portfolio analytics, that risk profiling that you talked about. Those are the exciting things, and they deliver orders of magnitude more value back into the corporation. So it's how we work alongside those folks to generate a business case like that. Cool. Jerry, back to you. Let's see what a really good quality high-end tool can do for us in this space. Give us a flavor. I know it's quick, but give us a flavor.
Oh, I am going to do my best to make this work, but and I'm gonna, when I say go, you're gonna start this video. We're gonna start this video, and I am going to do my best to keep up with the video today. So I hope you enjoy it. And what we're seeing here, this is the legal contract request portal in ContractPodAi, and we're going to go now with how you actually walk through the day in the life. We give you a set of agreements that you can choose. Once you've chosen one, you get into the video. There we go. It goes through. We bring you into your request portal. We're walking through what would normally be a third-party piece of paper here. We've received the document from your customer from the other side. We're filling out all the details. You're actually able to fill out a lot of that information. And now since it's third-party paper, we're going to bring it into the system. You'll notice that the Run AI button is checked. The AI is running in the background as we start this. Now we're at our screen, at our main contract page, where you can do almost anything with the contract. You could do it. You're looking now at the obligations and where they scored. Now, we talked a little bit earlier. Can we pause here for a second, Jennifer? We talked here a little earlier about risk and risk management. What you looked at just a second ago was the risk scoring done on the AI immediately. What you see a second ago, or before that computer opened, here we go, you could see that we've got non-compliant and compliant text. Now, we've programmed the playbook in for this, and the AI is actually reading, well, we won't say reading, but the AI is analyzing the text, looking at it conceptually, looking at it through what it's been trained, and then determining whether that text is compliant or non-compliant. Okay, to keep going, we then assign a risk score based on what that is. Jennifer, let's keep that screen. There we go. So what you can do is I don't know what's happening. I don't know if anybody else can see it. Paul, is it working on your end? There we are. Jen, let's hit play. Let's keep going. You can see the scoring come up, and we've actually programmed that in. What we'll do now is we'll look at some of the extracted text versus our compliant text, as well as guidance for the user. Now, we can teach the AI right here. A big part of machine learning, and this is teaching the AI and showing it what's important. Once we've taught the AI, once we see what's going on there, we actually can go in and redline it live. What you're seeing here, we could accept the risk, we can remove text, we can delete red lines. The AI will run again, and you'll see that it went from just being a 10 out of 20 to now 18 out of 20 on our risk scoring. Once we pull that out, we can go and look at those clauses again, see how it made those decisions, and understand what's going on. Why did it make that change? You could see the changes. You can see how this is done. We do have the ability to add in as many clauses, as many types of what we call key legal obligations as you want. We also have the ability to run tasks and deal with other changes based on that. So what we're going to show here very quickly is just a payment due date obligation. In this type, we've said, what's the value? You see it says weightage there of the payment due date. So now, maybe if our payment due date's 30 days and the customer wants 90 days, we can do that. Once we have that in there, we can do something very cool, which is trigger the trackers, trigger the tasks for various people. And what you see here is the task is there. We can actually use a tagging, tell a payment's done, and boom, the AI has actually said payment's done. I'm going to notify this. And yes, I know this is our 2-minute demo. So if you do want to learn more about it, I am more than happy to get a real demo, a longer demo set up where you can learn more about it. You know, earlier I said that this was the end of an advertisement demo, where you kind of hear, product looks like it's subscribed, product is here, we're showing you today. Do not use ContractPodAi while drinking and driving. So I do know that this was a little short, a little fast. I would be more for you, Diana, as for anybody else, Sukritri, I would be more than happy to have you reach out to me, to Paul, to Lauren. We will be more than happy to put you with the right people to do a more in-depth demo. And this is just a very small part of the product.
I think that's
but I wanted to show the risk scoring because we talked about it.
Sure. I think it helps to show what a flavor of how a tool works in this space. So I think it was a valuable couple of minutes. Thank you, Jerry. Lauren, take it home for us though. What are what's this checklist of the view?
So this is like the bits and bytes of things. This is the features and functionality that you want to look for. The way that this is going to help present questions that you can ask. There's a white paper associated with this that goes into detail on all of it. I know we are at time, but I do want to say that it's not all about features. It's also about the company you keep, right? So it's about the company. It's about having a good product roadmap. It's about having people that are good about explaining what you need to do and how you can go through and make good decisions to get you the best result in the process.
Perfect. Yeah, this is a takeaway slide. As you're going through your requirements, make sure that you have a focus on the integrations, a focus on how it's going to get implemented, focus on features that map back to your business needs. These are key and critical things. So Lauren, thank you so much for sharing this. But as you say, we are out. In fact, we're a little over time. My apologies for that. It just remains for me to say thank you to our audience. Great interaction, great questions. We haven't been able to answer them all, but we will follow up, absolutely. And to Lauren and to Jerry, thank you for sharing your expertise today in what is a really exciting and such an important area for our discipline. Great job, guys, as always. I love working with you guys. And all that remains for me to do is just to say, please do enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much for your time. Bye-bye now.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Paul. Bye-bye.